with us.
So we have one question that we're focused on in this holiday miracle adventure, and that is, tell me about a time when the embodiment of love created a miracle in your life.
Yeah, as you ask me that, I actually feel touched because I didn't know how I would answer that. There's been so many opportunities for love in my life and so many miracles that have been created because of it. And something that comes to me really profoundly is something that happened about 2 weeks ago, which is as I've been building out the miracle store and getting expert coaching and mentoring from people, as they were digging in, they realized that part of the miracle store mission is charitable giving, that my plans are to establish a foundation, and in the meantime to donate a percentage of profits to women and children in need. And this was kind of buried on the site. It was a link and it was kind of like not very prominent. They said, this is important, Chris. This is really important. This should be the center of what you're doing, not a side note. And it really hit me. And even now I'm getting a little teary-eyed because I realized that that's what the miracle store is for me, is a way to bring love into the world in a much larger way. And there's two elements to that. One is because our world needs more positive messages. And when I wear a shirt like this one out in public, it's impacting other people in ways that they don't even know. Our brains take in, a billion pieces of information a second. And if one of those pieces of information is positive, I've already made a difference in someone's life. If someone's having a tough day and they see it and they pause and take a deep breath, or they come up and say, thank you, I needed that today, it's been a rough day. Anything that can make the world a better place, that's important. And that was kind of the beginning of the mission of the miracle store. But what happened in that coaching session 2 weeks ago when they said, hey, look, this charitable giving piece, it's important, it needs to be at the forefront, it hit me in a very personal way. Because I was raised as a boy to be chivalrous, to really respect and honor women and children. And so then moving forward in life, I had a speech in college where they said, do a presentation either for or against a position. I was absolutely for the death penalty. Eye for an eye, kill them. They did it, they deserve it, take them out. So I started doing my research, and there was no economically or societally justifiable reason for the death penalty. It literally costs more, all this other stuff. Statistically, the only reason, if we believe in eye for an eye, and I said, well, I don't want to fail this, so I'm going to get an A, I'll switch sides. And I did a presentation for, abolishing the death penalty. And then the next speech, he says, by the way, now you have to present on a position that both sides would agree on, whether you're for the death penalty or against the death penalty. And I did my research and I looked and I said, reducing the murder rate. And everybody can agree, less people killed, you don't need the death penalty as much, no problem. Well, in that, what I found was that the two biggest reasons for people being on death row and the two biggest murder reasons were not the things that we tend to think of. There's not mass murders and things like that. It actually was crimes of passion. So people were jealous, angry, cheating spouse, that kind of stuff. It was people under the influence of drugs and alcohol, sometimes those two together. But it's also women escaping domestic violence. It was women who had no other way out to save their lives. It was either their life, either they felt like they had no way out. And my research showed that women and children needed to be empowered more. And so that was the second anchoring experience for me, as to why the Miracle Store donates 10% of profits to women and children, and specifically domestic violence. The third reason, and I've never actually revealed this before in public, only a handful of people know this about me, which is I actually was a victim of domestic violence. And it's rare for men to be a victim of domestic violence. And I thought I was being spiritual by holding space for my partner when she had her anger and her fits. But I didn't realize it was impacting me. And it was escalating. And when she would make threats, such as to pour boiling water on me while I was sleeping, I didn't believe her. I said, well, she won't really do that. And so I would um, not realize that I was being abused and that that was emotionally violent, even though that never happened. To live in fear every night that the person I'm in a relationship with would do that to me, even unconsciously, even if I didn't believe it, it's still going in there. A billion bits of information per second. That's one of them. It would escalate. There'd be yelling. At one point, there was a time when she picked up a chair and she threatened to hit me with it. And this was confusing to me because I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't doing things. It was literally her anger and rage coming out, and I was being victimized by it. And so she picked up that chair and she said she was going to hit me with it. And I just stood there, and I just stood, and I refused to fight. I refused to give anger to it. I refused to get energy to it. Um, and thankfully, she swung at the wall and took a giant hole out of the wall, and we covered it up um, with a poster. I think it was, some artwork. Certainly, I didn't want people coming to my home and seeing my shame and seeing any of that. Definitely part of the challenge of domestic violence is it needs to stay hidden. We can't talk about it. We can't show it. If we had bruises, we need to hide them, put makeup on it, all these things. Um, and I still did not think of myself as being a victim of domestic violence. It didn't trigger. I was still in this spiritual space of holding space for people, being love, being light. And I didn't realize I was literally adopting the mentality of a domestic violence victim, someone who can't escape, can't leave the relationship, can't leave her behind, all those things. And then one day I was in the kitchen and just standing there, and she was in another rage, and the rage was escalating and escalating. She came into the kitchen and she hit me several times. And that's when I finally realized something's wrong. Like, it took all those other things, I didn't realize something was wrong. And that was it. And I left the house. I came back. I then moved out, everything else that came along with that. And I started doing research and realizing that I was a victim of domestic violence. I had taken that on. And I had thought I was being spiritual. I had thought I was being loving and kind. And those are true. But they were all defense and coping mechanisms to avoid the reality of my situation. So fast forward to the miracle store. Knowing what I know about how the economic impacts are harsher on women, and particularly women of color, knowing that domestic violence, having experienced that, knowing what that does to people, and how if a white male with a six-figure salary in our world, could still have such a difficult time. I had every advantage in the world that our society provides, and I still had such a traumatizing experience that still sometimes haunts me today, no matter how much healing I do. If that's my experience, then at the very least, what I can do is help lift up others who have had similar experiences or are having similar experiences. And so when my mentors came back and said, and I didn't tell them any of this, they didn't know this part about me. They only knew that the charitable giving was part of the miracle store. When they said that it needs to be at the forefront, it just hit me like, I get it. This business needs to be a force for good, not a business that does good in the world. That's not good enough. It needs to be an actual force, like an unstoppable freight train for good in the world. And as soon as that happened, as soon as they said that, and I started really thinking, how do I do that? What does that look like on the website from a technical perspective? How do I phrase things? What do I share in the world? How do I do this? And I really started landing with it. I realized this is important. It is really important. And that place of love, that force for good, only 2 weeks ago is when I really woke up to say, this has to be, I knew the miracle store to be bigger than me. That was always part of it. But I didn't realize the degree to which the mission and the charitable giving needed to happen, and that spirit was waiting for the right time for it to happen. And so that moment really got me in touch with love, the love of our world, the love of the people who need our support, the love of myself that I didn't fully have when I needed it. Um, the desire to really bring about change in the world and do it through commerce. And so that was what evoked for me 2 weeks ago about love. And in the last 2 weeks, it's taken me on a whole different journey with the Miracle Store and how I can really have it live in the world as a force for good, as a force for love. So that's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question. And it isn't what I would have answered if you asked me just a day ago or 2 weeks ago, and definitely not 3 weeks ago. But when you ask me here, right now, today, and I centered myself before our call and I just grounded, that's what came up. And I said, okay, I've never shared this publicly with anyone before. Like I said, only a handful of people in my life know what I just shared, literally maybe two or three. Even people closest to me don't know some of the details I just shared. But that is what is at the core of the Miracle Store and the charitable giving and the mission and the love that it is to be in the world.